I'm going to give you guys a crazy thought. And this is your industry update thought. And I'll ask you at the very end of this, because I know you guys are very social media gurus. So there's this thing on social media called a reel. And it's where you dance and you sing and you kind of point and little bullet points pop up on the screen. So here's my question at the end of the industry update today. If you were going to do a social media reel and there were bullet points that you would point to that you would want a seller to pay attention to, I'm going to ask you at the end of this industry update, what are the bullet points for your next reel? So, gentlemen, how we feeling? It's February.
Fine.
Doing great.
Great. That's it. That's it.
Awesome.
All right. Okay, here we go. Numbers. They're not that, they're kind of weird this week. And you got to remember there's a couple things that have happened. One is last week was the last day of the month. So that kind of skewed the numbers over the last week. But take a look here, Fulton County, last week there were 488 active listings in the MLS. This week there's 532. Thumbs up on that. There's more inventory to show potential buyers, right? Under contract, pretty even. Pending's gone up a little bit, but solds went down a little bit over the last week. That's okay because that was the end of the month, right? So Fulton County looks pretty decent in terms of inventory starting to grow. DeKalb County went the wrong way. DeKalb County had 293 listings active a week ago, went down to 269, but they only had 150 closings over the last 7 days compared to 212 the week before, 260 a month ago, 215. So it looks like inventory is really starting to take a toll a little bit on DeKalb County. You get out to Cobb County, Matt, where you live, 317 a week ago, down to 273 in active listings this week. Contracts went up from 275 to 293. Under contract went down. Those kind of wash each other out. You got low closings over the last 7 days too in Cobb County. So I could make a comment that says inventory might be catching up a little bit with it in Cobb County just because there's nothing to buy, right? Although hashtag reminder, it's a 1 week outlook. That doesn't mean it's a trend yet, right?
And it's the first week, and it's the first week of the month, which fewer registered closings. Typically, people tend to go mid-month to end of the month. So if you look back at 1-3, it's 211. It was lower again relative to many of the other weeks at the posting cycle.
Yep.
So next week will be a better telling feat. Where's February going? Next week should give us a better indication and at least some more combined information.
Yeah. Where Gwinnett County inventory was building, lower closings, inventory building. There's a lot to go buy out in Gwinnett County right now, which is just a different market. It just goes to show, Rick, you're the one that always reminds us real estate's a hyper local game, right?
100%.
Absolutely. If you get out to Cherokee County, inventory still climbing a little bit. So every county's got a different story right now. We don't have a universal theme going on in the greater metro Atlanta. You really got to kind of dive into the county you're selling right now. Any comments on the numbers, guys?
Not unexpected.
It looks pretty standard.
Okay.
What we're hearing and what we're experiencing at the agent level as well on the ground. So
Just it's I don't want to say anxiety. I don't think people are having anxiety about the market, but if you're a heavy buyer's agent right now, you're going to experience some frustration. Yet the coaching conversation or the encouragement conversation is there is so many opportunities to go list houses right now if we just stay in activity, getting in front of that game and that conversation with the sellers. Because it's spring market, everybody, the buyer demand is at an all-time high. So what does that mean opportunity wise? That's the little thing on the reels that you need to be popping out there in thoughts to sellers, right? All right. On Market Watch, the big headline is this: home price growth may return to normalcy. What does that word mean? Debatable. 5 economists and real estate pros predict what will happen in the housing market in 2022. So here's the predictions. Give me your commentary, gentlemen. Mortgage rates will rise.
That sounds like a definitive yes.
I don't even think that's a prediction anymore, is it?
Well, and they're saying instead of a 1/4 point raise, they're going to do a 1/2 point. And that's based on a number of things. And I did some research in advance of the call today, and sorry to just jump right in, but the 2018 to 20, we were looking at 1.6 to 2.5 maxed out inflation. We bounced up to as high as 7% last year. So their goal is to curb inflation. The way to do it is raise the cost of money. And then that trickle down effect will impact rates. It's not immediate because realize the Fed rate is between banks. But ultimately, if the bank has to pay more to borrow and move money, the consumer is going to feel the impact of it at some point. I think the saving grace in all of this is that they're still only predicting interest rates for, long-term housing loans to be around 4 by the end of the year. And sounds high relative to what we've enjoyed in the 2s, but historically speaking, that's still extremely generally perceived affordable.
I keep reminding agents, I said, you got a give and a take here. Do you want to chunk 50,000 cash down on a property over asking price to get into a house, or would you rather pay a 4.25% interest rate and hold on to your cash? Because it's going to work that way. If the rates go up, it's going to pull the demand down, which will allow you to buy for value instead of overvalue. Yet you're going to pay a little premium on the rate, but I actually think I'd rather pay a 1/4% higher in interest rate or a 0.5% higher and keep the cash in my pocket, right? So it's a give and take, but you got to make sure you understand how it all kind of works, because okay, yeah, great, you might have got a 3% interest rate a year ago, but you paid 80 grand to get into something. Just food for thought. But anyway, that one's kind of given at this point. The next one is home price growth may return to normalcy. I'm on board with this one. I don't know about you guys. What do you think?
Matt, hit it.
I'm on board too. I think obviously if rates go up, like we're saying, we're seeing more seasonality back to what it looked like in 21, 2020 with, if we get to 4% interest rates. I think that's a healthy number, 5%, 4 or 5% in home growth. I think that's what we want. So I'm going to say yes, because that's the direction I really want it to head in. And I think it will. I think that's the overall goal of the Fed at this point.
Yeah, I think it's an important broadened perspective to understand that normal price appreciation, if you look at a 20, 30-year trend line, is 4 or 5%, right? That's what they consider normal. Yeah, I don't know that we're going to be 5% at the end of this year, but I think we're moving that direction. And people might go, oh, that's not a good thing. We've been experiencing 15% price appreciation. Remember, the 20-year trend line or the 30-year trend line, if as long as we're outperforming that, life's good.
I would ask someone like Rick, who's been in the industry for a long time and been in business a long time, anything that is up 15, 20% over extended amount of times, I would think couldn't last. Usually the repercussions of that are not good. And I would think getting back to a more normal standard 4 or 5% growth would be a good thing, right?
100%. The faster the climb, the harder the fall, because things have to cycle back. Economics just don't work that way. You can't sustain extreme growth and appreciation without some, cloud that chases it at some point. And ultimately you're challenged by affordability. And I think the Fed's decision to raise interest rates will actually affect someone who, consumer confidence on one level, then also people who are a little more sensitive to rate. And if you pull a few buyers out of the market along the way, you probably impact supply and demand, which also will suppress a little of the price appreciation, because some of that, let's get real, man. You get 15, 20 offers on a house, someone just overpaid.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So this one I had not even thought of until I read the article. So it goes back to interest rates going up, but there are buyers in a lot of our agents' pipeline that have interest rates locked with the lender at 3% or 3.5%. And those locks are going to expire in the next 90 days. So there is an immediate motivation for those buyers to go maybe even overpay for property or get it under contract fast because they're going to lose their interest rate lock. And I hadn't even thought of that till I read that, and I went, okay, so that's going to create an acute first quarter around buyers needing to buy property fast.
Yeah, I think, Brett, it also the fear of affordability and what actually a 0.5% can knock you out of as far as the price of the home you actually qualify for. I know a lot of our lenders are putting out good information on 0.25% increase, a 0.5% increase, and what that does to qualifications and affordability for the buyer, and it can knock you out of a price point.
Sure. And if you're getting a lender pre-approval letter on a listing of yours, and it was dated 90 days ago, you might need to get an updated approval letter because the interest rate could have changed and changed the affordability of that client, right?
Exactly. It's a good time to also have conversations with your potential buyers and prospects about the importance of credit and the importance of cash down. And that still affects interest rates pretty significantly. Your credit worthiness really matters. And if interest rates go up, it'll matter even more. And it'll also help you pre-qualify more convincingly. And so we all know, it's a challenge to dissect 10 or 12 offers for not just the one with the highest net value or price, should it close, but the highest probability that it will close, which if the market tightens up a little becomes a much bigger deal because there's not always, a one up right behind it, and timing is everything.
Yep. Prediction, it'll still be a tough market for buyers. Yeah, I think we all kind of agree on that one.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Back to the prediction number 4, it'll be a tough market for buyers. So what do you guys do for your FHA buyers? I'm finding that a lot of listings, whether they've been owned for more than 91 days, they're saying no FHAs. I'm assuming it's because of the mandatory clause, but how can we combat that? Ribbon, these cash property or these cash programs won't work because of the flip rule. Plus they add 3 months on top of it. So they got to wait 6 months to sell it to an FHA buyer.
Yeah.
I mean, what options do we have?
Go with a different lending program if possible and help build a case for why they're still their best buyer. So sometimes it comes down to an emotional decision to pick the buyer a seller likes best. If it's owner occupied, make sure you sell the story of the experience and why, people care who buys their home in some cases. But if it's not, again, back to what I said, highest likelihood of closing at the highest, net profit, those things will always reign supreme in the eyes of the typical seller. So you have to, personalize your offer. And in some cases, if possible, see if there's not another program that has the appearance of more competitiveness.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to add, I have found good success selling myself as an agent. Oftentimes they can see that the things that I do are that I'm serious about getting the job done. And I've had several instances, and I'm not a super high volume agent yet, where they've said, we chose you over other deals because we know you're going to get the job done.
Love
Perfect.
that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, 100%. How you follow up and the predictability of your behavior and professionalism makes a massive difference in the confidence of the cooperating agent, who can then transfer that story to their seller's decision-making chain.
Yeah.
If they answer the phone.
Yeah, Kendra, I mean, there's not a magic there's not a secret here. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're in a hot market where there are cash buyers and conventional buyers and people that are financially stronger where they can waive contingency, it's going to be challenging to get an FHA buyer into the mix. But I think all the above, relationships with agents, finding ways to get them more motivated, finding the terms that a seller might prefer over a conventional term, meaning maybe you lease it back for 60 days at no cost to allow them to stay in the house longer, and they might choose you because you're willing to bend further than somebody else would. There's lots of little tips and tricks, but at the end of the day, I don't think there's a secret here specifically around getting an FHA buyer to the table right now. Make sense? Prediction number 4 is still be a tough market for buyers. Yep. Wild cards. I mean, the question is, okay, so a lot of people change their living scenarios because employers were allowing a lot of people to work from home. If all the employers in downtown Atlanta said, no, come back to the office or lose your job, that could change buying patterns. Do I think it's a immediate thing on the front end? Not right now, but employment models is what they're calling it. Models of employment affects our real estate industry for sure. And it's certainly a little bit of this great resignation and all the above, right? And then spring will bring more activity. I agree with that. I think second quarter is going to look different than first quarter. I think first quarter is going to look a lot like last year did. And I think second quarter is going to feel a little more normal. So hang in there, ride this first quarter wave, this spring wave, bet on your activities that you do in your business, and just know that will pay off come April, May, and June. I believe that wholeheartedly. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish, Brett.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Could we discuss what normalcy looks like for the metro market so far as appreciation or growth rate? Because this market watch 5%, that's kind of a nationwide number, right?
Well, 5% is a nationwide number, but Metro Atlanta was a 5% market previously. So when they're saying return to normalcy, they're saying Metro Atlanta will return to a 5% of home appreciation over time. I don't think we'll see 5% in 2022. I think we'll see double-digit appreciation in 2022. I think 2023 might look like 5%, depending on what interest rates do and buyer demand. And I can tell you this industry update, the conversations we're having today are not going to be the same conversations we're having in October. They're going to look different, right? This year will change quite drastically as the government changes, as the pandemic changes, as employment changes. There's a lot of bigger maneuvering factors that are going to change what our industry looks like. Just my opinion. Matt, Rick, throw in your 2 cents.
I mean, I think your spot. I think it's a great question comparing to the rest of the country. And, looking at a few of the presentations we've been a part of recently, Atlanta has huge population growth that is way exceeding a lot of the other cities across the United States. So, when we're looking at normalcy, if I had to make a bet, a prediction, I would say I would feel we're definitely going to be more than 5%, just because of supply and demand within our specific market. Maybe not 15 or 20%, but I could definitely see us closer to, 10 or 11 with 17% population growth versus the rest of the country around 7.
I'd agree 100%. I think the The reality is we're enjoying immigration into Atlanta and Metro Atlanta proper. I mean, the predicted number is 1.5% growth, and on a $6 million number, that's a lot of new people. And so if 65% are homeowners, which is the current absorption rate for homeownership, that's a lot of people that are expecting to buy property. And unless interest rates go up significantly or some event sort of removes or compresses some of the buyer demand, I don't think we're building and creating enough housing to support that level of growth locally. So the odds of it being inflated relative to the national norm or the national experience, I think it's likely.
And just the last add-on that, I think it's important to mention that, institutional investors see our growth as well. So when institutions are pumping money into buying houses and then there's less inventory on the market, it's just flooding the appreciation, making the appreciation grow even more in our local market. So.
Another aspect to demand.
Perfect.
So, but this Market Watch article, that was a geared towards nationwide, or was it that in Atlanta? Okay.
It is. It
And
is,
then-
but we're not too far away from the national news. We certainly experience a better real estate market than most. But if you think the nation's going to be at 5% and we're going to be at 20, that's not an accurate statement. We might be at 7 and the nation be at 5, kind of thing.
So if I could ask one more question. So I've been thinking the same thing, Matt, that and Rick, that you were saying that, we have so much growth in Atlanta and so many people coming this way, and we always have been a magnet, and now even hotter. But then what about these iBuyers that are buying up this property? Are they a wild card for a fundamental that it's something we haven't had before?
Yeah. They're taking, I'll give you a short answer to a very big question, Terry. They're taking inventory out of the hands of the real estate industry, meaning those houses are not going to be in the FMLS and even available to buy and sell from traditional real estate perspectives. So if they take enough inventory out, it creates the shortage, which drives prices up for everybody else because there's not enough houses to buy.
Well, that's scary to me. How do we know how much they have?
Didn't we just 10% or something? What was the number we were discussing?
20% in Cobb County, 10% in some parts of the city.
That's an active listing number. And I mean, yeah, they take 10% of the market. Just being transparent, I look at it as an opportunity, as a fiduciary. It's going to shrink up the market and the available homes for people to buy.
But it's not the same story in every market. I want to be very clear about that. There's downtown Atlanta, that's not the story. Buckhead, Georgia, that's not the story. Cobb County, that's the story. Parts of DeKalb County, that's the story. Gwinnett County, that's the story. So it just depends on where you're at. If you get to some of the outlying areas like Bartow and Floyd County, and that's not necessarily the story yet. So you got to be, it's a hyper local conversation, but of course we're trying to give a 1,000-foot view here. Let me move on because I want to cover a couple of things I think are important this week. It says, sorry to burst your bubble, we're not in one. Here's the big quote that I think people need to understand. And it says, to some people, high appreciation is going to be a bubble. And they think because we're having this high price appreciation, it's going to be the bubble. But to others, it's high speculation. And I think that's a big point of difference, meaning people are not buying houses speculating that the value of that house is going to go 20% over the next 2 years. They're experiencing that price appreciation, but they're not buying on speculation. They're buying on need today. I need that house today, and I'm buying it, and I'm willing to pay a little extra for it because I need that house today. I'm not buying that house as a speculator would, saying, hey, it's going to double in value or give me 1.5 times over the next 3 years. if people start buying real estate from a place of speculation, that could create a little bit of a housing bubble scenario. But the reality is the people that are buying and selling real estate right now are not buying it on speculation. They're buying it on need. And I think that is a little bit of a dial that kind of helps you see, hey, this isn't necessarily a housing bubble metric just because we're having price appreciation. It's a big concept to kind of get your head wrapped around, but I think it's a pretty important point that kind of dispels the concept of a bubble, right? Sorry. But
Really awesome point.
But the contrary to this says, NAR research says 77% of consumers believe we're in a housing bubble. 3 out of 4 consumers you talk to thinks we're in a bubble. What do you think of that number?
And if you look down, it says 44% of real estate agents believe we're in a bubble. So I think
Can I add, sorry, go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say, I think it's people who casually watch the market and then people who are in the market. And I think if you're in the market diving into these things, you understand a little bit more about what's going on compared to what I went through 12 years ago as a homeowner.
Right.
And you have to define what a bubble is. Are we going to, every 10 years there's a cycle and you give back a little bit and it's common. That's just the nature of economics, the economic world 100 years back to today. But a bubble is like what happened in 07 and 08 when we took just a massive hit and foreclosures became 50% of our market in some areas. And that's a different experience. Will we give some back? Likely. Is it a bubble? Not likely, because affordability is still working out.
So you say that a bubble is past tense and a speculation is looking forward. Is that a very simple?
No, a bubble could be tomorrow. The bubble is like the bottom falling out. That's how I view the definition. It goes back to my first statement. You have to define what a bubble is, or is it just a subtle market shift or the typical trend line deviation?
Yeah.
I think also people are kind of thinking about if this is a bubble or not based off of history, right? Yeah. So if you kind of look at what happened in 2007, granted, yes, there was a whole bunch of crappy loans being originated, but if you look at the trends, the interest rates started going up, and then all of a sudden, people were buying houses like crazy. So it kind of sounds like, if you look at history, and history is a big old circle, interest rates are going up, people buying houses like crazy. I get it. I kind of see why they would think this is a bubble.
Yep.
I'm playing devil's advocate, by the way.
You're all good.
Right.
The last thing I'd point out is Atlanta Business Chronicle posted this article back on the 2nd, and they called it land banking. So I find it interesting when builders are going and buying a bunch of land and sitting on it. And it just tells you where their head's at around the next 5-10 years. They see the market and as something to invest in over the long term if they're banking land, for sure. And I also think it's an interesting thing because land historically has always been a good investment because land doesn't depreciate, but there's no income potential off land, just owning land. So it usually keeps most investors out because they go bank land and they can't do anything with their money, right? So I thought it was interesting. So here's the $1 million question, my TikTok reel stars. If you're going to do one, what are the 3 or 4 talking points this week that if a seller saw your reel or your TikTok and saw those bullet points, you would want them to read it?
I'll do one and then you do one, Rick. I'll say interest rates are rising.
That's a good one.
I made you guys feel uncomfortable right now.
Well, and I think inflation is a genuine concern because it leads to the conversation around affordability. And when people are uncertain about their capacity to provide a great life for themselves and their families, and affordability becomes the question, they tend to withdraw and hold back, which will decrease supply. So that's a long statement, or excuse me, demand. That's a long answer, but affordability is something we need to get in check.
Yeah. You know, the last thing I'll leave everybody with on mine is equity is a real thing. And if, not that I advocate gambling, there's your disclaimer, but if you've ever bought a lottery ticket, at the bottom of the lottery ticket, it says you're going to win $500 million. And human nature starts thinking, hey, wait, I'm going to go buy a yacht. I'm going to go buy an island. I'm going to do these things. Well, scale that down to somebody on equity in their house. If you're the advocate or you're the counselor or the advisor that shows them, hey, you've got blankety blank hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity in your house, human nature creates emotional response around that conversation. And so you should be having equity analysis conversations with everybody in your database. So mine would be equity's real. Let's talk. Happy Monday, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
See you guys.
I guess.
See ya.